religious institutions are becoming less significant in the lives of many Americans.
Religious organizations need to work harder to be centers of inspiration to draw people closer to grow in their spirituality.
The American Religious Town Hall meeting is now in session.
Welcome, friends, to the American Religious Town Hall meeting, where the discussion of religious, political, and social issues is meant to promote the cause of religious freedom and to help us better understand each other. And now, here's your host and moderator, Pastor Jerry Lutz.
Thank you, and we're so delighted you joined us for today's program. We're glad you tuned in, and we look forward to you tuning in the future. But for now, what we want to do is have our panelists introduce themselves before we get into our discussion and say a little bit about what they do. Let's begin with the gentleman to my right. We'll work our way around the table.
Hi, I'm Carl Troval. I'm the Richard J. Dinda Professor of Lutheran Identity and Mission at Concordia University in Austin, Texas.
And I'm Tom Plumley. I'm a minister in the Christian Church, Disciples of Christ. I serve as the senior minister of First Christian Church, Fort Worth, Texas.
My name is Mel Robeck. I'm an ordained minister with the Assemblies of God, but I'm also senior professor of church history and ecumenics and special assistant to the president for ecumenical relations at Fuller Theological Seminary in Pasadena, California.
Hi, I'm Tony Matthews, and I'm the senior pastor at North Garland Baptist Fellowship in Garland, Texas.
I'm Andrea Luxton. I'm president of Andrews University in Berrien Springs, Michigan, which is affiliated with the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
I'm Dan Levin. I'm the senior rabbi at Temple Bethel in Boca Raton, Florida.
Well, thank you, everyone, for being here today. This is going to be a great discussion, as you heard from the opening statements made by two of the panelists. But let's get right to the subject, shall we? Late last year, the Pew Research Center finished compiling and analyzing research they had done a year before about how and where Americans find meaning in life. The separate yet related studies contain both open-ended and closed-ended questions, a method often used by researchers to get the most detailed and candid responses to their questions. An open-ended question is one that can be answered in one's own words, whereas a closed-ended question is asked with multiple answers from which to choose. The objective was to answer as definitively as possible this question: what makes life meaningful? Across both surveys, the most popular answer is clear and consistent, and that is, Americans are most likely to mention family when asked what makes life meaningful in the open-ended question, and they are most likely to report that they find a great deal of meaning in spending time with family in the closed-ended question. But after family, Americans mention a plethora of sources from which they derive meaning and satisfaction. For example, 1/3 bring up their career or job. Nearly a quarter mention finances or money. And 1 in 5 cite their religious faith, friendships, or various hobbies and activities. Additional topics that are commonly mentioned include being in good health, living in a nice place, creative activities, and learning or education. Many other topics also arose in the open-ended question, such as doing good and belonging to a group or community. While it is encouraging to see so many Americans finding meaning in their family relationships, I believe it is noteworthy that only 1 in 5 derive meaning in their lives from religion. That raises some questions worthy of our panelists' consideration today. The first question that comes to mind is this: what do you think accounts for religion being on the lower end of the list of things from which Americans derive meaning in their lives, even lower than finances or money? Another question: should faith groups be concerned about what these studies have revealed about where religion ranks among the things Americans value most? And then finally, what can faith-based groups do to stem the tide. Well, that is our subject for today. Let's go back to those who helped to begin this program. Dr. Robeck, welcome to the program today. And you've done some studies on this, I'm sure, through the years. At least you've had reflections on this particular issue. Tell us some more about your thoughts on the subject from your opening statement.
Yeah, I haven't done any studies on this, and I really do have considerable concerns about various polls, including Pew at some times. I really wonder what the questions are that are asked and how those questions are framed. And what kinds of expectations they have, even in kind of open-ended questions. They can be biased in certain ways, and people can respond accordingly. I guess as I looked at the responses here, family doesn't surprise me in the least. It's a sense in which that's a part of our identity, a big part of our identity. But as I look at some of these other things, I mean, it's all about me. It's my good health. It's where I get to live. It's what I get to do. It's all these creative things that I get to, all the trips I get to go on, those kinds of things. It's all about me. And I worry about that because I don't think we are all about me or each one of us. I do think that we have to think seriously about where we come into the question of, is it all about us? In other words, the Commonwealth or the community of faith or the local congregation or whatever it is. And I do think that our institutions have let people down dramatically. All you have to do is open up the newspaper. Every day there's something about some scandal within some religious organization or some problem that they're facing or where they have drawn a line in the sand and nobody can cross the boundaries there. Young people have a hard time with boundaries in the first place. And in order to bring them inside those boundaries, one needs to help them out. But the problem is, I think, we're so ingrained in thinking about ourselves and where we are that it's very difficult for people to think seriously that religious institutions are going to answer our problems.
All right, thank you. Rabbi Levin, you also made an opening statement. Could you expand that for us, please?
Well, I share many of the sentiments, Mel, that you shared. I would add to that that I think in some ways religious organizations have let people down by an obsessive focus on doctrine and dogma as opposed to the real life situations in which people find themselves. I think it's really the mission of religious organizations to somehow translate, integrate, synthesize the wisdom, that incredible storehouse of wisdom that exists within our different faith traditions, and to teach people how those traditions and that wisdom can bear upon the actual lives that we live. And I think we're not always good at doing that. I think certainly in my tradition, a focus on compunctious observance of ritual life has alienated people. In a way, it just feels like the lives that they live are divorced from what's going on in their religious heritage. And I think we need to figure out how to build those bridges. I think the other thing that happens that is really important is, however, that if you can use religious teachings and religious practice to create the conduit to holy experience, it becomes incredibly compelling to continue and to grow in that. So if we think of an old-fashioned switchboard, right, where you could take your individual cable and plug into something holy like knowledge, understanding, wisdom, love, justice. There's a lot of energy that's transferred, which is why I think the study says so much about family. Because when people are engaged with love, it is spiritually edifying. I want more of that. I suffer from a terrible affliction called Home Depot addiction disorder, which is a need to play with tools, even though I don't necessarily know what to do with them. So I love to participate with Habitat for Humanity. When I have the opportunity to do that. Now, it's 3 hours of sometimes very grueling work, but I come away with more energy at the end than when I started, not just because I got to play with tools, but because I got to stand next to somebody who's actually building her own house that she's going to get to live in with her children. And when religious practice is a conduit, a catalyst towards that kind of spiritual experience, then I think people find religious practice that much more compelling.
I think you have some fellow sufferers on this panel, too, with regard to that syndrome you just mentioned. Yes, Reverend Plumley, your thoughts on the subject, please.
Yeah, I appreciate both the thoughts that have been expressed so far, and want to say that, unfortunately, I think just a whole lot of people view religion as little more than a source of exclusion, little more than a source of violence even, and division. We do more talking about who is acceptable, or even more, who is not acceptable, than we do talking about the meaning of life. What makes life rich? What makes life worth living? We've got to begin by admitting that fact, and then approaching ways to teach people outside of the religious organizations how that might be an exaggeration, because it is, but generally then begin reforming ourselves to make ourselves more about love and less about hate, more about hope and less about hopelessness because you haven't behaved correctly, or you were made differently than other people. God intends that our lives be good, and that we have life abundant. Our religious traditions teach us that. I don't know of a religious tradition that does not teach that. God intends that life be good, fun, joyous, and you see that presented in our religious institutions very seldom.
All right, thank you very much. Dr. Luxton, welcome to the program. Your thoughts, please.
I wasn't at all surprised by the 20%. In fact, in some ways, I thought that's not too bad. Many countries would be really excited to have 20% of the population feel this way. So I wasn't at all surprised. But of course, within the North American context, it is a decline. There's a word of mine that I really kind of like. It's irresistible. And kind of give a little parable here. Last summer, I went to Ukraine. They have a museum there. It's called the Museum of Tiny Things in Kiev. And when you actually go there, the outside is nothing. I mean, and you go in there and you just see anything. There's just these kind of little cubicles. But if you go to those cubicles, then you can use a microscope to look inside. And inside there is something that has been created, made, that is you cannot see by the eye. But it has been made by an individual, this whole museum made by the same individual. And each one of those things is unbelievable. For example, on the edge of a pin, there will be a whole like a little mini structure. And they're just all the way across everything. It's just amazing. Look it up online, just phenomenal, actually, what they're able to do that you cannot see. Now, to me, that place is irresistible. If I go back to Kiev, I will be finding my way there, because it had something that I cannot resist just in the beauty of what was there. And so the question I have to ask myself is in the contemporary age, what does it mean to make our faith, our institutions, religion, what does it do to make it irresistible? And sometimes I think we have felt we've got to be bigger and better, and music's got to be amazing, we've got to do this and we've got to do that. I think it's much, much simpler than that. And maybe the fact that the family comes first tells you about what it needs to be. It needs to be something that is personal, engaging, meaningful, making a difference in someone's life, not just their personal life, but their connection with the community beyond. I think that's where we need to go if we're going to see a turnaround in this figure.
Thank you. And now Dr. Matthews, welcome.
Yeah. I agree with everyone, and I agree with Mel that I think people's expectations are sometimes unrealistic, and I think it's a me focus. In addition, quickly I'll say that the church needs to scratch where it itches without compromising what we do. I read a survey that most people are not affiliating with churches because they disagree with the religious teachings. And in addition to that, they disagree with how churches are so political. So I think when we see the research and it says family and finances, the Bible is very relevant. I think we need to have a shift in the church. And the Bible speaks so much about family, and we need to take family, take finances. I think outside of salvation, perhaps Jesus talked more about stewardship outside of salvation in the Gospels. I think these issues that people are struggling with, the church needs to be there. God became flesh, right? Jesus was born in a feeding trough. He came to earth where we live, and the church should be relevant and touch people where they are. And I think, that will help. We need to do our part, but we can't be responsible for what other people do. But we do need to scratch where it itches.
Thank you. Now, Dr. Trovall, your comments, please.
I was at a nursing pinning ceremony at Concordia last week, and I was talking to the speaker, who happened to be a person who works with people who are dying. It was hospice. People are close to dying. And we were talking about the meaning of life. And I said, do you find that when you ask your patients about life and its meaning, do you get a lot of wisdom? And she said, it is incredible how much you can learn from someone who's dying, because death has this way of focusing you in on what's really important. And I guess everyone's saying, well, what did they say? And we didn't get that far in the conversation because the service started. But my point in all of this is that I love this conversation. I love everything everyone has said. And the thing that I'm connecting with is that I think the other reason family is important is just because it's community. And I think that in our individualistic society, where we're so individualistic that we don't know what it is to be community, and when we find it, it's this powerful experience. Because it's love, and it isn't just a community that serves itself, but it turns outward and serves other. That project of love, of service. Those are just things you can't buy. You can't sell, and it takes commitment to be a part of it, and that's the challenge. And it's about inviting people with you to serve. Yeah.
All right, Dr. Robeck.
Yeah, I was thinking a couple of things. And I've just lost my train of thought. That's so bad, especially on TV. The fact is that when people do come to us, we do need to have community. I know it was the issue of they become too political or they become too boundary conscious, okay? And, there's a sense in which I really resonate with something you said a couple weeks ago when in one of these discussions about needing the Sabbath for rest. People want to get away from all that stuff that's around them. So the political side of it can be a piece that drives people away. It can be. At the same time, I know that there is the tension that we need to speak prophetically sometimes in a political reality that we're facing. The other side of it is, and I find this especially among young people who have a more difficult time with the boundaries. And the boundaries are there. And again, I like, Rabbi, that you bring in wisdom and tradition and history. I'm a church historian, and there is all kinds of wisdom in history if people would pay attention to it. But they don't. We're not taught. We're not expected. History's just written by the winners anyway, so it's always biased and it's not worth having. And there are a lot of schools that are doing away with history altogether. So I really think that we need to think seriously about how we educate our children, how we think about boundaries, and how we portray those boundaries as something that are loving and are well-intentioned and not something that are simply meant to keep people out.
All right, thank you, Reverend Plumley.
Yeah, the piece that bothers me in this whole conversation is the quarter of people, 25% of people who connect meaning in life with money. Yeah. And I find that odd because we know you can't buy happiness. You can't buy the things that really make life meaningful. You can't buy community. You can expose yourself to all sorts of things that pass for togetherness or community, but you can't really buy, you can't get out of yourself. You know, it seems to me like that answer is folks that are driven by fear. And they feel like they're not going to have enough of that money, and therefore they're somehow going to miss out on life. No, that's not what life's about.
All right, thank you. That's all the time we have for this segment. If you have more to say, we'll come back in a few moments, and in your summary, perhaps you can summarize what you would have said during this segment. But for now, there's an important announcement I'd like for you to stand by for. We'll be back in just a few moments.
Thank you, Pastor Lutz. We hope you are enjoying today's program. If you would like to learn more about the American Religious Town Hall, please visit our website at americanreligious.org. That's americanreligious.org. There you can read about the mission and history of the program, learn about the Town Hall estates, and view past programs by clicking the appropriate menu buttons. Each week, Pastor Lutz looks forward to receiving your letters. You may write to him at the address shown on your screen. Send your letters to Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. That's Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. Thank you for writing, and thank you for watching. And now, back to you, Pastor Lutz, and today's closing statements.
Thank you. I agree with Mark wholeheartedly to go to the website, and you can find there some great things there about past programs that we've had here at the Town Hall, topics and subjects that you'll find archived there for you to view, and then also to learn about the Town Hall Estates. It's a great organization. You need to get closer to them and understand really what it is all about that they provide. Now let's go to our summary statements. Let's begin with Dr. Troval. You're first.
I was wondering where in our culture people go for inspiration these days. And when I talk to students, this is what most of them say. Oh, did you see the TED Talk on whatever it is? Just name whatever TED Talk it is. And I was thinking about this word inspiration, and I thought, well, where are people inspired? I hope that our places of worship become not places where you have this performance, but where people are actually giving you concrete ways to be a better human being in the world. I think that people are craving that material, and that's partly why religion is often irrelevant, because we're not addressing those deep parts of us.
Good thoughts. Thank you so much. Now, Dr. Robeck.
If I had a wish for every American, it would be that you get outside of this country and go someplace where the world does not look or sound or feel like anything you have ever seen, felt, or touched. If you visit places which are racked by poverty or by persecution or by war or by whatever, it changes the way you think and what you consider to be the most real, most important things, what gives the most meaning in your life. I wish that every teenager would be forced to take a trip abroad, and I don't mean simply to Western Europe. I mean to some place in a third world country or a sub-Saharan African country or something like that, because I think it would change your worldview in such a way that maybe religion would make more sense to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And now, Dr. Luxton, your summation, please.
I've changed my summary 3 times in the last 2 minutes, but I'm going to follow on with what Mel said. I think one of the most transforming times for me in my life was just what he has said. When I was 22, spending a year in West Africa, when you didn't have communication outside, really. When I came back to England after that, I really hated England. Because the value systems I saw in a totally different way, and it seemed so shallow. And so I really do resonate with that sometimes I think the drive with money being so important, it is a values issue, I think. Where are our values now, and where does faith fit into that? And so how can we make religion relevant within the context of where values have kind of got upended, I think is a question we have to look at.
All right, thank you very much. And now, Rabbi Levin.
So I think for thousands of years, the way the world kind of worked was people believed God was here and we were here, and God commanded and we performed. There was a lot of debate about what it was God commanded, a lot of debate about what was we were supposed to perform, but this relationship was not in question until the modern period when it went like this. And now God commands and we'll think about it. And we are sort of, the sovereign self. So the fundamental mission of religious organizations now is to have to speak to people in a fundamentally different way. So it's not about the voice of God that speaks to you from the outside, but it's the way that God speaks to you from the inside. And the more that religious organizations can use the gifts of how we form holy community, how we inspire people to connect to the holy elements of life like justice, compassion, love, wisdom, that will build that sense of godliness and the ability to hear God, to be compelled by God, that will grow from within, as opposed to relying on it coming from without, where people find that alienating.
All right, thank you very much. And now, Dr. Matthews.
Yeah, I'd like to encourage our religious leaders. I know as for pastors, we work hard, we pray, we love people, and sometimes it can be discouraging when you're doing all the things you should do and membership is down, folks aren't coming. I just want to encourage you to preach the word, stay true to God's word, and leave the increase to God. Do all that you can do and just love people.
All right, thank you very much. Reverend Plumley, your summation now.
Thank you. I think there's great wisdom in the suggestions that some have made around this table, that we get out of ourselves, out of our comfort zones, out of places that we're familiar and things that we're familiar with, and people with whom we're familiar, and understand and begin to notice people who can find joy in what we would consider to be horrendous circumstances. People who can find love even in outlawed relationships. People who can find wisdom even where there is no education. People in this world find good even in places that are radically different from all the things that we consider blessings. And I think exposure to that is a great educational opportunity.
All right, thank you very much. This has been a very enlightening discussion around the table. I hope you've enjoyed this at home. That's why we're here. We've invited you into our space, you've invited us into yours, and this is how the interchange goes. And thank you so much for being with us today. We look forward to being with you again sometime very soon. But for now, the charter of the American Religious Town Hall provides that Roman Catholics, Protestants, Jews, educators, and others may appear on this program and can declare their beliefs without hesitancy. And the rest of the members of the panel will uphold and guarantee that American right to all who will appear, irrespective of race or creed, so that the rest of the world can see that here in America we believe in civil and religious freedom, not only in theory, but in reality. And so now, friends, until next week at the same time and over this very same channel, the American Religious Town Hall meeting stands adjourned. And may the God of all of us bless all of you.